Rod Berglund. Rod, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me.
You're from Petaluma.
I am one of 12 people.
So when we take a look at the wine industry, what was it like? What are your first remembrances of the wine industry in Petaluma?
Well, there was no wine industry in Petaluma.
So when did it start happening?
I grew up. Among my best friends were an Italian family, Lombardis, here in town. My friend's grandfather, Nonno, I never knew what his real name was. It was just Nonno. After Nonna died, he would come to my best friend's house because his mother was the only girl in the family, so therefore the best cook. And I learned about wine sitting at the table there. At their table, his unwritten rule, was two things. You ate your vegetables, you drank your wine. And in those early days, it was probably CK Mondavi, and special occasions it was Pedroncelli. But it started out with a little glass of water and wine, and so I was introduced to wine as food. And early on, Nonno made wine, so we were sort of aware of the fact that he made homemade wine.
Okay, so the building, Lockman and Jacoby, do you remember that building?
Absolutely.
Where was it?
It was over, there's some drugstore now. It's this side of the freeway.
Where CVS Pharmacy is?
That's the one, yeah. That whole block going back towards the river. There was a complex of buildings, and there were a lot of feed mills and things along the river as well. But down by the river, towards the river to the north, there was a building. It was the Lockman and Jacoby Winery. And he had pictures with the fountains, formal fountains and things, and the size and stuff. It relocated, I believe, right after the earthquake in San Francisco had burned it down there. But later, talking to people, I asked why, since there was that winery and there was the James G. Fair winery down in Lakeville and others, no one seemed to know about them. And the answer that finally came back to me is, well, unlike Santa Rosa and the rest of the county, this was a teetotaler town.
We're visiting with Rod Berglund, and we're getting the story of the Petaluma Gap wineries. And tell us about La Creme Vinera, your winery. Maybe I didn't pronounce it correctly. I hope I did.
Close enough.
How would you say it?
La Creme Vinera.
Tell us about that.
Well, I admit, after I got out of the Navy, I went back to school. I was at the junior college and then Sonoma State. I remember sitting in a class, a botany lab at Sonoma State, and I was a pretty quick student. I was doing pretty well, but I was not paying much attention because I found myself doing projections for what if I made like 5 barrels of wine, what it would cost. And that was the beginning of the end. And friends of mine got sick and tired of hearing me talk about it all the time. So they all said that they'd pool what money they had, and we'd start a winery, which we did. Ended up, had a tough time though, looked around the county for places, tried to find buildings that could be used. Real estate agents showed us lots of things. There are always issues. And finally someone said, well, I know a little place for rent, warehouse district in Petaluma. I thought, that's cool. They've got drains. They've got everything. So we thought it was a slam dunk, got our state license, our federal permit, got everything. Then we had to go to the city council. They almost torpedoed the entire thing. They thought it was pretty amusing. A winery? We never had a winery. What do we do with a winery? And they were joking and laughing and stuff, and it was very close to harvest. And finally they said, well, we don't know what to do about a winery. You might overflood the entire sewage system. And I said, well, actually, we're talking about maybe 10 tons of grapes and this X amount of stuff. And they're looking at me. I said, well, we'll have staff look at it some more. Why don't you come back next month? I said, well, next month after the grapes will be done. So they thought about it and huddled for a minute and said, oh, what the heck? And gave us our permit, and the rest was history.
That's interesting because 1979, that was the old Hopper Street plant, and it wasn't that sophisticated, so maybe you were lucky that, you were able to get through the gate. The Petaluma Gap, tell us what that means to this region, if it can be established as a separate AVA.
Well, this is a fascinating area. There's a lot of history of grape growing here, even though for years I was told you couldn't grow grapes in the Petaluma area. It was too cold, which was ludicrous. But they also said you couldn't grow grapes west of Highway 116 by Sebastopol, which was also ludicrous. So we've learned that was all wrong. What gives the Russian River is climatic conditions that makes it world famous is the fog intrusion through the gap. And the gap is basically an area along the coastal hills. When everything else was being uplifted, it actually subducted. And that's allowed the gap in the hills that allows the fog to flow in. It's sort of like the Golden Gate. You can watch this fog, this cooling thing comes in. So it is a very important geographical feature. You know, you look back on the historical record of all of the vineyards that were around here, you know, up by Cherry Street, that whole area, up along the boulevard, all the hills up Pingrove, and of course things down in Lakeville. There was a large diversity of vineyard operations, and they predominantly grew Zinfandel in those days. Or they called it Zinfandel. It could have been a mixture of things. So we know you can get things ripe here that require a longer growing season, but I think this area is primarily going to be known for cooler climate grapes because the climate's more conducive to that, and there are fewer areas that can be successful with those. So I think the future here is going to be cooler climate grapes, not limited to Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. They can grow many other things as well, but I think that's going to become, with time, there's a steep learning curve. The Russian River Valley, not many years ago, wasn't known for much of anything. Corbel had people plant French Colombard for sparkling wine. If it wasn't French Colombard, you had Zinfandel. Pinot Noir and Chardonnay weren't grown there. Now Chardonnay's one, Pinot the second is world famous. And people forget that not many years ago, that wasn't the case. So I've been watching this area with interest, and I think I don't know how long it's going to take, but at some point it's going to reach a tipping point. And people are going to recognize not only that it's very high quality, but enough of a critical mass of quality production here to really, I think, attract a lot of attention.
I'm David Glass. I want to thank Jim McCormick, the California Wine Museum owner. And the Wine Museum, of course, is going to be opening next year on the square in Santa Rosa. It'll be a unique facility. You'll be able to not only sample wines and have a tasting room, but you'll also be able to read about the history of wines throughout the state of California. And did you know there's more than 1,000 wineries in California? And you'll be able to find out all of that history at the Wine Museum. So keep that on the radar screen. Coming up on September 20th is a fundraiser out of Keller Estates Winery. That'll be a good time for all. And on September 27th, a fundraiser coming up at the Petaluma Museum. I'm David Glass for our producer, Kaye Chandler. And until next time, it's been nice talking to you.